Okay, and I'm gonna test the mic to make sure that we are live. Somebody keeps changing the microphone on the computer. I don't know why they do that, but they do, and then it doesn't pick up the sound, and I've got this video with absolutely no sound on it, and it's just highly annoying to me, but anyway. Try to do that, make sure that it's working.
How are you?
Make sure that
How are you?
I'm good. How's Charles?
He's Charles. They opened another restaurant
course they
and
did.
so he's psycho. He fired 2 managers over the past 2 days.
Okay, so this is not working. I'm gonna hope that it's working. I mean, my
Sounds
phone
about
is not working. Last class, we were talking about logic and critical thinking, and I was making an argument, and I was showing you how to make arguments that you should choose and select degree programs based on whether or not you're going to be able to support yourself after college, given the expense that that degree is going to cost you now, as compared to what it cost in the past, when the state of Oklahoma made paid 80% of the tuition and you paid about 20%. When my mother went to college, by the way, they paid for about 95% and the student paid for about 5%. So we've radically flipped the equation on what it costs to go to college. So I made this argument and I said that if you wanted to have a reasonable assurance of success in that, you should consider a sales degree rather than a degree in opera or, you know, jewelry making or whatever else it is they teach over in Hippy Dippy across the pond over there, because you're gonna starve to death and die and be a candidate for natural deselection. So we have one of our former graduates here to talk to you about Gartner, to boost my argument as to why you should become a sales person. Now, Professor Kaiser asked if I could give them 20 minutes in my class because we are so far behind. There's absolutely no way I can give you 20 minutes in my class because I've got a lot of substantive material that I have to cover today. So I'm gonna let you have a sales pitch and you get about 10 minutes, right? So this happens a lot in sales where you think you have a 30-minute meeting or something like that, and they're like, nope, got 10 minutes. So take it away. There you go.
Okay.
And I would appreciate you all giving her your attention.
Right, 9:32. So I will try to be done by 9:42. So hi, my name is Ryan James. So I actually graduated from UVA last year in December. I work for a company called Gartner. Really quickly, does anyone know who Gartner is? Okay, impressed. Funny enough, when I was in your seat last year, I did not know really. Yeah, that sounds good. I did not really know who Gartner
Hi
was.
everyone, so sorry
Hi,
about
JC.
that. Got a little
That's
lost.
my associate as well. This is JC. We're just giving like our little spiel
Cool.
to JC. So to kind of give you an idea, if those don't know who Gartner is, we're a research and advisory company. So we actually help 77% of the Global 500. Kind of what does this mean though? Well, we help provide them like more actionable insights, whether it be through best practices, case studies, research. So we are constantly researching like what are the best ways to maybe handle certain business decisions that come top of mind. So I work in the HR function, but the reason I kind of got my start like at Gartner was actually through JC. So she had come to my class last year saying, you know, hey, this is who we are, you know, you guys are about to graduate. What is kind of the companies you're looking at and like what are you deciding to do? And at the time I was an international business major. So I thought, oh, I'm gonna go work abroad. Sales might be in my future, might not be. But then after hearing JC's spiel, I was like, okay, I wanna work for Gartner. I wanna work in sales. And honestly, it was probably one of the best decisions I've ever made. Gartner is a great company to work for, especially after having graduated college, just because we really do try to help you get prepped for the real world. But additionally, like, and I get it, some people think I can't do sales, but Gartner, it doesn't even really matter if you kind of have a sales background. It helps without question, sure, yes. But it really does help open like a lot of doors for other people. So I'll let kind of JC take the reins here, kind of give a better context.
Thank you guys, sorry for being a few minutes late here, but I do see some familiar faces, which is exciting. Hi guys. And yeah, I mean, Ryan said it better than I can because she's the one that's actually enrolled in the sales function. But what's cool about Gartner is that a lot of people think of selling and they think of this transactional type of sell, right? You've got insurance, you've got a vehicle, you've got something that you're physically trying to sell to them. So usually you're trying to convince them of the products and the features and trying to memorize all the specs and why they should use you versus a competitor. Gartner's a little different in that every time we have a conversation with a client, it's going to be based on their needs. So we're not necessarily going in with this sales pitch of here's what you should buy. We're going in and sitting down and saying, how can I help you? So the majority of what we're doing is problem solving and coming up with a strategy for them to hit mission critical priorities. That can be so many different things. As Ryan just said, she works with HR, but we've got different verticals that you could be aligned to. Could be HR, could be marketing, could be government. It could be so many different things. And that's what we call our global business solutions. On the other side, we also have global technology solutions. So we have sales roles available in both capacities. We specifically have a segment of our business that works with technology, and that could be market research. Maybe you're Apple getting ready to launch a new MacBook. You need to know market segmentation. You need to know what competitors are using and all of those different types of things. Also, you could be helping an HR leader switch out their platforms for talent acquisition or onboarding or training, different things like that. So there's so many different things. And I mention all the variety because it makes it to where no 2 days are the same. And a lot of sales folks will say that, and that may be the case for them. They don't know out of the 20 services which 4 or 5 that company may need. So they're trying to figure that out in a consultative way. But with Gartner, it's all consultative because you're sitting down and having a conversation. So the skills that we really look for, again, like she said, you don't have to have a sales internship. You don't have to have a sales background. If you do, that's great. And that may help you along with the sales cycle and prospecting. But what we do need is someone that's coachable, someone that is really feedback driven, somebody that likes to actively listen and be able to really empathize. That's one thing that I noticed immediately from Ryan, her communication style. She just really sits and thoughtfully listens instead of just planning what she's going to say next. So if that's something that resonates with you, Gartner could be a good fit. But that's enough about Gartner. Would love to hear what kind of questions you guys have if you want to hear more about our day-to-day, if you want to hear more about the training, or what kind of things are most important for you all.
You can ask us anything.
Yeah.
Like, we're transparent.
I know I've seen you in class
The
several times. I've
interview
seen Connor several
process.
times. I've seen several of you guys. So you've
Yeah.
already heard a lot of this, but
Interview process, I would say, like, don't get me wrong, any like big interview that you do for a job is gonna be always, of course, scary. Honestly, out of all the ones that I had, Gartner was, yes, intimidating, sure, because I really wanted the job, but like the interview process, really what you're looking for, and correct me if I'm wrong, but they just want to see, are you going to be coachable? Do you have a like kind of a champion mindset? Are you going to give up? No, you want to have some grit to you. You want to make sure that you're tenacious and you're going to keep pursuing, asking questions, actively listening. Does that help answer your question a bit? Okay.
yes, we have specific traits that we look for. And before I put you guys into the interview process, I send you so much information, so many resources. I make sure that you've got everything that you would need to prepare, and then it's just up to you to take that step. It's basically like a professor giving you a study guide and saying, here's what's going to be on the exam, and then it's up to you if you want to use that or not. So we have traits like will to win, somebody that constantly challenges themselves and sets goals for themselves and really looks to achieve things in their own life and in their personal life as well as work life, right? So if that's something that resonates with you, that's one of the traits we look for. Additionally, executive presence. So this is a weird one, and this is one where I get probably the most coaching and feedback because we don't expect you to walk into an office full of CEOs and own the room immediately. We understand that you are recent college graduates, or maybe you're a junior going into an internship. What executive presence means to us is all of the intangibles that come along with communication styles. Are you using filler words? Are you excited and confident when you're speaking? Are you making eye contact? Are you actively listening or just making a list of things and checking them off in your mind? So a lot of those are what we call executive presence, but essentially it's just, can you walk in your room and confidently present and get your ideas across? So that's one of the big traits that we always look for in addition to will to win. But again, I send a whole list of them. I think there's 7 or 8 that we prioritize, and I'll even send you sample questions. So I recently had someone going through the interview process with Gartner, that's a UCO student, and she practiced with Dr. Goad, and they went through everything together. So we make sure that you're fully prepared and confident. It's really more about, do you see yourself in that type of role? Because it is a lot more difficult than just having a transaction, right? We're selling research and information, which is this abstract idea, and we have to come up with a value prop for businesses on how we can help them reach whatever their initiatives are that year. But thank you for the question.
What about the internship program. That's one of the things that I think is really attractive to a lot of our students is that they have a real opportunity to go to Gartner and experience the whole corporate culture through that process. So can you tell them about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we actually recently had a UCO student accept our internship for next summer, so we're really excited about that. But we offer an internship program that's 10 weeks. And one of the great things about it is that it is completely flexible. If you want to stay in Oklahoma and do your internship, that's an option. If you want to go down to the Dallas office, check it out a couple of days, that's an option. Or some folks have family in Dallas and spend the entire summer there. So we offer a really cool work from home, flexible option with the internship. But our main goal there is to show you exactly what you would be doing in role if you were to come on for full time. So you know, without a doubt, by the end of the summer, is this something I could see myself doing? And is this something I'm passionate and excited about? The account manager internship is specifically segmented towards our technology clients. So you would be helping with things like prospecting. And when I say prospecting, I don't mean cold calling for 8 hours a day down the same lead list and then doing that again the next day. I don't just mean searching on LinkedIn, sending emails. We do a variety of those things, but we're thoroughly researching clients before we ever make that first contact. So I'm sure Ryan can tell you about the messaging when she's sending out, but when we say prospecting, it looks a lot different than it does at other companies because we have a lot of intentionality behind it. Maybe we saw in the news that that company got a new CFO. So we're reaching out and saying, hey, we saw that you are new to role. We've recently helped other CFOs with scaling for 10% growth in the years. That's something that you could see coming down in your projects or pipelines or your priorities, right? So we're doing a lot of research on the front end. We're sending emails and voicemails and things like that, but it's not just 8 hours a day cold calling when we're prospecting. Additionally, we're helping you put together pitch decks. We research clients very thoroughly using a lot of Gartner research and other tools, but we'll help you figure out how are you going to present? What are the main things that you need to pull from to put into those presentations? And you're paired with an account manager in role already, and then also a manager for additional layers of support. So you've got all the fun things going on with the other interns, but the learning piece and then the support all baked into that. And it really gives you a good glimpse of what the feedback culture looks like at Gartner and how well you are supported and trained once you do get into a full-time role.
Do they still have the internship in Florida?
We do, yes. So I will say the internship now is more focused in Dallas. So we do hire some in Fort Myers, but at this point, honestly, we don't even have that many left because the majority are in Dallas. Yeah. So we equally have a center of excellence in Dallas and Fort Myers, Florida. And for full-time, we hire about 60-40, more leaning towards the Dallas office. But yeah, if Fort Myers is something that you guys feel passionately about, there may still be some internships left there. And I know we do have full-time roles there for anyone that just has a wild hair and wants to go to Florida.
All right, thanks, I
Okay,
appreciate
cool.
it.
Thank you guys. It's good to see some of you guys. We'll be hanging out in the sales lab later today, so come see us if you want to say hi.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we've had a number of students that have gone to Gartner. It's a really good opportunity. The ones that go and like it really, really like it. And the ones that don't think that Gartner's a fit for them, they still enjoy the opportunity, particularly those that go to Florida. You know, it's a nice way to go to Florida and spend the summer there if you request that. So we were talking about, I just need to finish talking about philosophy and the 3 great questions. And then let me launch this. We can move on to the foundations. So the 3 great questions of philosophy that we talked about, that it answers are the question of knowledge, the question of governance, the question of conduct. The question often arises, what is philosophy? I've answered that with these 3 great questions. This is the domain of philosophy. Who invented it? Did the Greeks invent it? And if they did, why did they invent it? Why did they invent this way of thinking? You do not have to use philosophy to answer these questions. There are 2 other ways that you can answer these questions. Those ways are problematic, but you can do this. One way that you can answer these questions is through a mythology. What is a mythology? Well, we would call that a dead religion. And I think this is an important point because when you ask, why did the Greeks invent philosophy? And they did, for the most part. What we see in terms of, and a lot of my students who come from other cultures will say, well, they didn't, there's Eastern philosophy. Eastern philosophy, yes, developed, but it was highly tied into mythology in many instances. Or it was highly tied into a religion like Buddhism or something like that. In its purest form, the Greeks, I think, really invented philosophy. And the reason that they invented it is because they didn't have a satisfactory, they did not have a satisfactory mythology that answered these questions in a way that was compelling. I gotta figure out how to stop the slideshow or how to pause it. The Greeks had a religion, which we now call a mythology. Greek mythology. You can take a course in Greek mythology. Anybody familiar with you should remember this from your humanities course. If you took, ancient through medieval, what the Greeks' religion was based on? No, nobody remembers this. It's a pantheon. Go ahead.
Well, I don't know the specific term. I just thought it was the quest for immortality.
Okay, well, there's a pantheon of gods in the Greek religion, right? And how did this pantheon of gods get to be gods? They killed the older gods. The chief god, Zeus, kills his parents and becomes the king of the gods. People over in humanities would be horrified by my oversimplification of this, but the two main gods before we have the Olympians were the Titans, and it's a brother and sister. The brother marries his sister and produces children. He's told that one of his children will kill him, so every time his sister produces a child, he eats the child. And his wife basically hides one of the children, feeds him a stone, and these gods, these children of these gods, take over and kill their father in order to become God. These are not the kinds of people that you're turning to for what is the meaning of life. They're messy. They're coming down from Mount Olympus and they're breeding with humans and producing demigods. These are messy people. You don't want to upset the gods because you might not get good crops, you might have bad luck, but you're not turning to them for the ultimate questions of life. What is the meaning of life? And that's why the Greeks invented philosophy. You can answer these questions with religion. The problem with doing it that way is, whose book are we going to use? Well, in the United States, a lot of people would say, well, we're a Christian nation, let's use the Bible. Well, which version of the Bible should we use? There are different versions. The Catholic version is different than the Protestant version. The King James version is different than some of the other, the new international versions of the Bible. It's problematic to answer these questions using philosophy or using religion or mythology instead of philosophy. So what are the foundations? Where's the first work of philosophy? The first fully worked out system of philosophy that we know about. There may have been other systems before them, but they're lost to history. We have echoes of these. You can find echoes of philosophy, for example, in the Christian Bible. Where do we find that? Well, we find it in the story of creation and the story of Adam and Eve. We find these echoes of philosophy. Adam and Eve are living in the garden. They're perfectly content. Everything's happy and wonderful. And then they eat from the aptly named tree, fruit of knowledge. And at that point in time, they become fully human. We know this state existed before philosophy. We can call this the primitive psyche. where man did not view himself as distinct and separate from the cosmos. Ancient man viewed himself in terms of cycles. Modern man, once we develop and once we eat from the tree of knowledge and we become fully human, insists that he is only associated with a particular epoch. So for primitive man, everything was cyclical. So you had night, day, right? Night. You had seasons. You had winter, which turns into spring, which turns into summer, which turns into fall, and back to winter. You can see this. It's a cyclical way of thinking. They did not view themselves as distinct and separate from the cosmos. Once we get this and we become historic, man views himself in terms of linear. So we start here, recorded history, and we go this way to the present. This is important because it impacts the way we view things. If you view things in terms of cyclical, it's pretty much life, death, renewal. And the way you treat everything revolves around that cycle. Historic man views things as being progressive. It's no longer just the cycle of winter, spring, summer, fall. Modern man or historic man views it in terms of a progression. And we have progressed as a result in terms of our philosophy. So the first fully worked out system of philosophy that we know about is called Republic. And it answers, in this, Plato answers these three questions: the question of knowledge, the question of governance, the question of conduct. It's a fully worked out system of answering these questions. I asked you this when I talked about logic and critical thinking. What is this? You all said it was a table. I said it's a desk. We had a disagreement. The philosophy of knowledge that we see, the epistemological foundation for what this is in Republic, is dealt with. There's an ideal of everything according to Socrates in this book. So we know about Socrates from his most famous student, Plato, and from a friend of his who was a poet, Xenophon. Socrates would never have gotten tenure or promotion at an institution like UCO. I have to write papers in order to keep my job. Socrates never wrote anything down. He ran around Athens and asked hard questions, like the question that I asked you: what is justice and what does it have to do with marketing? What is justice? Well, justice in that sense was not the law. Right? And there's this question: is this just the law? Is the law important? It is. But the law and ethics are not mutually inclusive or exclusive categories. So you have the law, you have ethics, and there is some overlap here. And every textbook in this field, for the most part, says, and every section of textbooks say, well, the law is an acceptable moral minimum. It's not. And from a marketing standpoint, we should be horrified at this. Because the law itself may be immoral, and we experienced this in this country for many, many years. We enslaved an entire class and category of people and abused them. And then when they were set free, we basically put them back into that class of people by something called separate but equal. The law itself was immoral. And I will tell you, from a marketing standpoint, when you do that, you limit your amount of ability to sell. When you say these people are categorically a priori unworthy, you have eliminated a huge percentage of your market. As a marketer, you should be horrified at that. So in Republic, we get this idea of knowledge is derived from the rational mind. Most people will not experience this. Most people are stuck in the mundane. They cannot get out of this fog that they're in. But there are these people that can see clearly. There are these people like Pythagoras who can see things like if you have a rectilinear triangle and this side is 3 and this side is 4, this side has got to be 5. He didn't do that by measuring triangles in the dirt or writing it on papyrus or whatever at the time. That's not what happened. He could see it with the mind's eye. And Socrates says, there are these people that can see it. He gives us the best worked analogy in all of literature in something called the allegory of the cave. So we deal with this question of knowledge. The allegory of the cave goes like this. Suppose that you have a group of people who were raised in a cave. And they're positioned in such a way that all they can see, the first time I heard this allegory, I sort of laughed and I thought, oh my God, this is so stupid. And then after I read it a few more times and had to struggle with it in other classes, so you're gonna get to see my really poor artistic ability here. So let's suppose we have this cave. Here there's an entrance to a cave. You've got people that are facing this way. There's a wall in the cave. Back here, there's this great fire. And then there are other people that are projecting things in front of the fire and casting shadows on the wall in front of them. These people who are raised in the cave are going to believe that these images that they see on the far wall are reality. And that's not reality. It's a shadowy image of reality. But if one of these people were forced out of the cave, they would turn around, and as their eyes adjusted, they would realize that the light behind them is producing these illusions, that everything that they thought before that was real is an illusion. And then if they're forced further out of the cave and into the sunlight, they're going to realize really that everything that they thought that was reality before was an illusion. Most people are in this haze. We do this all the time. We are oftentimes in this haze, in this what I call realm of magical thinking ourselves. We engage every day in what I call functional fictions. These are the things that help us get through the day. One of my functional fictions is that I come down here, I provide you with an education, I talk to you about these things that are really abstract, and it will expand your mind and allow you to become a better salesperson because you will be able to better argue your case if you can think abstractly. And I send you off and I have formed you not like Venus born of the foam, fully complete, but with the tools to go on and better yourself. That's my functional fiction. The vast majority of my students, probably get through my class and don't remember a thing I said at the end of it. But my functional fiction is I provide you with these tools and this opportunity, and you're going to go out and you're going to make a difference for yourself, your family, and your community. That's my functional fiction. It's these little lies that we tell ourselves. The reality is students get through my class, they struggle, they probably information dump the minute they walk out the door and don't ever think about this ever again, although they should. Most of us engage in these functional fictions. The philosopher, according to Socrates, can see things clearly. This is the person who can see in the realm of the forms. They can see the perfected ideal. They can see the absolute ideal of justice. So I asked you what was justice, and we got some ideas about justice. And one of the ideas that we got was this idea of the deserts theory. We talked about this, the deserts theory of justice, which is giving people their due. This one is hard. So one of Socrates' interlocutors in Republic is a guy called Thrasymachus or Thrasymachus, however you want to say it. And he says Socrates is wandering around, he's at his party, and this older guy comes up and he says, "What's going on, Socrates?" And says, "Oh, I don't know, looking for the truth, searching for the ultimate meaning of life. What is justice?" And they start this dialogue, and that guy kind of wanders off pretty early in the dialogue. He's an older gentleman. He says, well, justice is about being able to, be old and wealthy and wise, because at this point in your life, you have time to sit around and think about things like, what is justice? And, then some other guys come into the conversation. Thrasymachus, for example, I think is the one who comes up with, well, justice is the will of the stronger. And this is kind of a hard concept for Socrates to dispense with, but he does. The will of the stronger. We see this in action every day. You all are not terribly interested. I was very interested in philosophy. You're not terribly interested in it, other than you have to get this class to get your degree, to get a letter grade in this class to earn your degree, because it's required that you do this, and you want to get on with it and go out and sell something. Sell Gartner or sell Loves or whatever it is that you want to do. And maybe some of this will come back and you'll think about this, but this idea of the will of the stronger. So you're going to listen to me pontificate on this stuff, and you're going to take tests, and I'm going to tell you whether or not you got it right. And it's not going to be a pleasant experience for you, but if you don't do it, what happens? Well, you fail, right? I have power over you. And you're going to, because you want the grade, you're going to do these things. Isn't that the way the world works? Well, Socrates' response to that is, well, that may be the way the world works. It is the will of the stronger in many instances. If I have power, I can tell you what to do. But is that the way it should work? You don't need the philosopher to tell you what is happening out there. You need the philosopher to tell you what is the best that you can become. What is the best that you can become? Not what is actually occurring. Then we get to this desserts idea. This one is harder to dispense with, because it does seem to be based on an idea of, if I owe you something, I should give it to you. This one is hard for him to dispense with, but he does. And what we're looking for is the absolute concept of justice, right? So let's suppose that you have a dangerous weapon and you loan that dangerous weapon to me. Let's say a gun. We all in Oklahoma are fascinated by guns. I have a concealed carry permit. How many of you have concealed carry permits? Are you all a bunch of communists? This is Oklahoma. We love guns. We're fascinated by guns. We all think that we should carry guns. The first time I was on city council with a young man. I helped him get elected, and he wanted to pass an ordinance in Guthrie that said, not only could you carry a gun, but you have to carry a gun. If you're over 18, everyone has to carry a gun. And I said, Jason, he went on to be a state representative, by the way. I said, Jason, I don't think you should do that. I don't think that's a good idea. Why do you want everybody to carry a gun? Well, because at the time, or shortly before this time, it had ended by that point, we lived in what was called the bipolar world, where we had the sort of United States and South America over here, and we had Europe and then Asia, and you had this big block called Russia, or the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, and it was kind of split east and west at that time, and there were Western countries that were capitalistic, and there were Eastern countries that were not capitalistic. They were based on communism, and we had stockpiles of nuclear weapons as a result of World War II. In World War II, the United States developed the first atomic bomb. We dropped 2 of those bombs. And by the way, my grandparents were both employed by the Manhattan Project. My grandmother was the classified records librarian for that project. So she classified all of the nuclear documents and then stored them in the Monsanto Mountains in Albuquerque, New Mexico. So we build this bomb, we drop it on 2 places, Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and it changes the world. And then the Soviets get a hold of this technology, and they build these stockpiles, and we get into this position which was called the Cold War. And the thing that kept nuclear bombs from ever being used again after Hiroshima and Nagasaki was the knowledge that if anybody used it, the end of the world because we would have massive retaliation. If the Russians launched their bombs first, we would launch a massive strike in retaliation, and nobody would survive. There were lots of movies when I was growing up that dealt with this idea of a nuclear winter. Patrick Swayze was, when you don't even know who Patrick Swayze is. He was a very popular star at the time, played in one of these. What? Baywatch? I think that's David Hasselhoff that was in Baywatch. Patrick Swayze's most famous movie is Dirty Dancing with Jennifer Grey, which some of you have maybe seen, probably not. It's a rather old movie now at the time. But we had this bipolar world, and so the theory that supported this was called MAD, mutually assured destruction. And Jason's idea was that if we strapped a gun on everybody, nobody would use the gun. Because they would know that when you walk into the liquor store and you want to hold up the liquor store, that if you pull a gun, everybody's going to pull a gun on you. Now, that seems to work. It's predicated on what we call rational actor theory. The problem with it is, what if you have somebody who's not rational? Right? What if you have somebody who's not rational? You're going to have a problem. So we get this absolute concept of justice by the idea of the philosopher king. So what Socrates says is, look, if we is this not coming up over here?
You could say that he would kill less people.
That's true, I guess. You can say that you would kill fewer people if you had everybody with a gun. A lot of people die. I mean, there's a theory out there that a lot of the people that do these mass shootings, they want to die. It's basically called suicide by cop. That they have a desire to die and take out as many people as they can, which is not rational, right? I mean, that's not a rational person. So what we get is this idea in Republic. What he says is, if we look at, sometimes it's hard to discern what justice is for the individual because it's such a small unit. But if we look at a bigger unit and we say the bigger unit is indicative of the smaller unit, maybe we can figure out what justice is. So if for example, we look at a polis, which is a Greek city-state, the polis is really a big version of an individual, right? Polis are comprised of people. It's a bigger version. So maybe if we can figure out what is justice for the polis, we can figure out what is justice for the individual. Well, he goes through this, and what you get is this concept of the philosopher king. The idea that we ought to find these people and allow them to rule over us. This enlightened despot kind of attitude. In response to that, Socrates has a very famous student who's Plato. Plato has a very famous student whose name is Aristotle. And I actually like Aristotle more. I have a tendency to dote on Aristotle more than on Socrates and Plato because I think he offers more practical advice, and particularly for those of us who are in sales, I think he offers a far more insightful way of thinking about ethics. So let's see next. Aristotle comes up with something called duty ethics. So for Socrates and Plato and Republic, it's all about finding this absolute concept and applying it using the rational mind in this thought experiment, which is Republic. In response to that, Plato's most famous student, Aristotle, develops a different idea about what is ethical. And this is one that I think that we should think about in terms of its applicability to marketing and sales in particular. And it's the one that I advocate for probably the most. Again, I like Aristotle. I dote on Aristotle. So Aristotle looks at different. There's a very famous painting in which Aristotle and Plato are pictured in the center of the painting. You've seen this in your humanities course. And Plato is pointing up and looking up towards the sky, and Aristotle has his hand pointing down to the ground. So Republic is a thought experiment. It is logically consistent. It is the first fully worked out form of philosophy because it answers these three questions: the question of knowledge, the question of conduct, and the question of governance. So we have this question of what is knowledge? Well, there's a perfection idea of everything. These people who are philosophers can see that perfected idea. What is the right conduct? Well, it's going to be that in every situation, you're going to come up with the right, absolutely rational, comprehensive answer. And you're going to develop that. Kant comes up with some ways that you do that. We'll talk about that in a minute. And then we have this perfected form of governance, which is you're going to have a philosopher king on top. You're going to have, so he talks about men of gold, men of silver, men of bronze, and everybody's going to play their part in the republic. So you're going to have the philosopher king on top. You're going to have the people that are the leaders that are called guardians who will help maintain order. Then you're going to have men of silver. These are going to be the people that are sort of your tradesmen who have businesses and provide goods and services. And then you have men of bronze, people who are working and toiling in the dirt. And everybody has their place, right? Aristotle doesn't view things that way. Aristotle views things, again, looking down. It's not looking up and thinking about this from just a thought experiment. It's actual study. So I used to say when I taught ethics in political science that Socrates and Plato were the first political philosophers. Aristotle was the first political scientist. There's a difference between thinking about things logically in an abstract way and the way we go about scientific. Now, science is important. Philosophy is important. And there's a philosophy of science, and you see that developed in Aristotle. But what is it that Aristotle does that makes him different than these other two? Well, Aristotle, in his development of his theory on this, called duty ethics, views things not as let's go from the general and then apply it to the particular. He's going to look at the particulars and then see if we can't come up with generalizations. So Aristotle studies 350, for example, with regard to this question of governance, he studies 350 polis, or Greek city-states. And he says, look, there isn't just one type of polis that is applicable to all places and all people at all times. It sort of depends on what the sort of conditions that these people face are, but we can come up with categories of polis, and we can divide those categories into good and bad categories. And you can have good governments of one, good governments of a few, and good governments of many. So you have good governments, bad governments of these types. One, few, many, right? Go. That's so a good government of one, and he defines these terms. Good government is a government that governs in the interest of the governed. Bad governments are governments that govern in the interest of the government. So you can have a good government of one. He calls that a monarchy. A bad government of one, he calls a tyranny. You can have good governments of a few. A good government of a few, he calls aristocracy. A bad government of a few, he calls an oligarchy. You can have good governments of many, he calls that a polity. And the worst form of government of all is democracy. This is mob rule. Good governments govern in the interest of the governed. Bad governments govern in the interest of the rulers. Of these three types, there's one that he likes best. And it's this one. And the reason that he likes this one best is because it's got a balance. It's proportional. In a good government of one, you are likely to degenerate, and you can do this, into a bad government. If you have somebody, you know, let's, for all intents and purposes in this classroom, this is not really true, but I'm the government in this classroom. I make the rules, you either follow my rules or you suffer the consequences. Now, I'm not really the government, because government is defined as a series of institutions that makes rules and has the ability, it's a pervasive set of institutions that make rules and have the ability to enforce those rules by means of coercion up to and including death. I don't have the ability to take your life. Kind of wish I did. Might make things more interesting. You fall asleep in class and bam, I'd only have to do it once. Take out my .357 Magnum and smite you. I'd be willing to guess there wouldn't be a whole lot of people falling asleep after that. Right? No, nay. Be paying attention. I had a student write in my student evaluation some time ago, "You're not funny." I am. You know, that student should be put to death for even, you know, making me to have to respond to that kind of trivial drivel. Very easy. And I've seen this. I've seen professors who start out young. I started out when I was 22. And, you know, I was the young. So professors go through stages. If you start out as young as I did, you go through stages. The first is you're the young, hip, cool guy, right? I was 22 years old. I was younger than most of my students. I had a 39-inch waist. I could bench 275 pounds. And, you know, I was like fun and athletic. Now I've broken my hip. I've gained weight. I'm not, you know, as in touch with you all. So you go through the phase where you go from young, cool guy to major, fill in the expletive, right? And then if you last at this career long enough, you become the wise old sage. Right? So you go from young, cool guy to major, expletive, wise old sage. I've not reached the wise old sage yet. And I can tell you that when I was younger and hipper and cooler, you know, when students would say things like, "I didn't do this," or "I was, you know, blah, blah, blah," I would, "Bless your heart, you just don't understand. I'm gonna give you another chance." Now I'm like, you think your boss is gonna put up with that? No. Justice is fast now. No mercy. It's easy to degenerate into this. It's very easy for people to degenerate into democracy because they can be swayed by a demagogue. Someone who is charismatic and gets people to storm the Bastille. I'm not saying that we have echoes of this in our modern day politics, but I think we do. It's harder for this to degenerate into this because you have just enough people. You don't have so many that it becomes unwieldy and the mob becomes influenced by a persuasive, charismatic leader. Don't forget that Nazi Germany started out as a democracy. Hitler won election. But you have so many people and it's easy to get them off balance. In this situation, maybe he likes this one the best. This is the golden mean. And what you see throughout Aristotle's philosophy is this adherence to the idea of balance and proportionality. You see it in his treatise on friendship. Aristotle says, for example, there are 3 types of friendships. At one extreme is friendship grounded on utility. Right? At this extreme, there's friendship grounded on utility. At this extreme, there's friendship that's grounded in pleasure. Since you all are business students and marketing students, I'm going to take it that you all have had a job at some point in time. Almost all of my, every once in a while, I have a student that said, no, I haven't had a job. You know, my parents let me play video games and they're paying for this experience. And, you know, I'm like, oh, it's going to suck to be you. You know, one of these days when you graduate, you have to actually go out in the road. This was my brother. My brother never had a job until he became a tax attorney, never. And when I tell people this story, it's like, I had a job, I taught tennis. And I'm like, for 1 month, one summer, and then you decided that you couldn't play with those kids because they were ruining your game. My brother wanted to get a tennis scholarship, and he was the only one who got a tennis scholarship, the only American to have a tennis scholarship at OSU, the only one. And tennis is one of those games. I asked one of our sales students who was a starter for the golf team, Cody, I said, do you not like to play with people? My brother insisted that the reason he couldn't teach tennis was because these kids were horrible and he was becoming lazy. If you want to be a better tennis player, what do you have to do? You have to play people that are better than you, or at least as good as you. Otherwise, you become complacent. And so I asked Cody that. I said, did you feel that way? Because he was the starter for the UCO golf team. And he said, no, because I only play against myself. Golf is an individual sport. You're constantly trying to beat your last score. And so it's an internal motivation as opposed to a competitor. Because you can play golf by yourself, right? It's a game that you don't have to play with any other people. You don't have to, it requires no referent other. And you can get good at it. So you all have had jobs, unlike my brother. You probably had jobs in high school. How many of you had a job in high school? Everybody had a job in high school. Lots of those jobs are miserable jobs. They're working at Walmart. They're working in fast food. They're, you know, not fun jobs. Do you have friends at those jobs? You all are shaking your heads, yes. When you left those jobs, did you keep those friends? For the most part, some people say, yeah, I kept all, you know, I'm like, really, a lot of them? No, the friendship dies. There's nothing priggish about Aristotle in this. The friendship dies because you're no longer useful to each other. You form friendships. How many of you, I was a bartender in college. How many of you have tended bar or waited tables? Done that, a few of you, right? Yeah, I know you wait tables. You want the cook to give you, or the chef to give you your food on time so that your customers leave you a big tip, right? Because your tip is directly proportional to the level of service. And the way you get good service is you make sure that they get what they want. You get the order right and that they get the food in a timely manner. And you want them to do that. And if you really piss off, chefs are very temperamental creatures. You know? I know because I am one. I'm the executive chef for my family's business. And believe me, I'm very temperamental. You upset them and things may go poorly for you. So you want them to like you, right? So you make friends. When you move from Eddie's, right? That's where you work. Did you work somewhere before?
I worked at Topgolf, but I wasn't a server.
You weren't a server. Okay. Well,
I
when you
worked at Eddie's for 2.5 years.
okay, when you move from Eddie's, that's going to be the end of your serving. Hopefully, if you're smart, that's the end of your serving career. But when you move, it's been my experience that a lot of students who are in the service industry, they move because they think that they can get better, you know, tips or whatever. They have friends that go, for example, from Eddie's to Charleston's, where, you know, the tickets are generally bigger, which means that you're making more money for the same amount of work, right? So you're gonna find new friends. The old friends are not gonna be all that important to you because you're gonna find new friends. Then there are friendships that are grounded in pleasure. Again, nothing priggish about Aristotle on the pleasure deal. These are your drinking buddies. And when you have to go to whiskey school, or the Betty, you know what the Betty is? You don't know what the Betty is. There was this guy who was president of the United States named Gerald Ford. His wife was a horrible addict, and she founded something called the Betty Ford Clinic in California. So it's a euphemism for having to go to whiskey school, which whiskey school is where they teach you how not to drink whiskey, right? At the Betty or AA or whatever it is, they're gonna tell you, you gotta change your playgrounds and your playmates. That's what they tell you in AA. I don't know, I've never been, but I've heard this, right? That they're gonna tell you gotta change you can't keep going back to if you're in recovery, you can't go back to the bar and sit with those people, because they'll get you in trouble. Right? Lots of my brethren, lawyers, have a tendency to like to drink. Lots of them have gone through whiskey school, and they've told me about these experiences. So those friendships are going to end, and you're going to have to find new friendships. You're going to have to take up something else. In the middle is perfected friendship. It's not that your friend is not good for you or useful to you or pleasurable for you, but that is not the basis of the friendship. That is not the basis of the friendship. You befriend your friend in this situation because you want what's best for them. These are the friends you can count on one hand. These are the friends who are not only going to bail you out, they will. I used to teach criminal law and procedure. I was a lawyer and I've been a criminal defense attorney at one time. So I use a lot of criminal defense analogies. I apologize for that. It's just that they're pretty interesting. These are the people that will not only bail you out, they will help you move the body. They're the friendships of a lifetime. Most of us only have one or two of these. Now, what can we as salespeople learn about this? Well, one of the things that they used to say as an age-old adage is don't mix business with pleasure. In other words, don't become friends with your clients. In the more modern world, we recognize people want to do business with people that they like. And if you're going to be a good salesman, you're going to have to be able to be friendly with your clients. Now, that's going to be a friendship that's based on what? Utility. Nothing priggish, nothing wrong with that, just a recognition. How do we arrive at this golden mean? So we have the golden mean here in aristocracy. We have the golden mean here in terms of perfected friendship. We'll see this golden mean in terms of ethics. So for Plato and Socrates, it's this absolute idea, this at all places, at all times. And again, at the end of Republic, Socrates is forced to admit that his system of government will probably never come into existence. But that's not the point. The point, again, is not for the philosopher to tell you what is possible. That's the job of the sociologist or the political scientist or the psychologist. It's to tell you what is the best that we can become. For Aristotle, looking at this from the particulars up, well, we're going to have to determine what the purpose is of a human being. We have to arrive at the purpose. In order to determine what's ethical for that being, we're going to have to first of all, ascertain what is the purpose of that individual. And again, I think we can learn a lot as salespeople or as marketers from Aristotle in this discourse on what is the purpose of a human being. Well, there are two books here. One is the Nicomachean Ethics. Most people think this is the more complete work. It's named after his son Nicodemus. The first one is called, or some people think it's the first, the Eudamian ethics, and most people think this is the preliminary work and that it is the less complete, although Sir Anthony Kinney at Oxford believes that the Eudamian ethics is actually the more complete work. And I would hate to disagree with Sir Anthony Kinney or Daniel Robinson, also at Oxford, or he's deceased now, on anything Aristotle. But so what is it that we get from these? Well, first of all, we're gonna have to determine what the purpose of a human being is. How do we determine that? Well, Aristotle says that the purpose of a human being is the Greek word eudaimonia, the eudaimonic life. How is this normally translated? Well, it's normally translated as happiness. The purpose of a human being is happiness. Now, I think that's a bad translation. Daniel Robinson says that's a horrible translation of the word eudaimonia. Because in terms of happiness, we can't mean drink up, let's have another round. Right? Or whatever your vice of choice is. It's now legal. The marijuana is now legal in Oklahoma. Can't be like, let's roll another joint. It's not what Aristotle means by happiness, right? Daniel Robinson says that the better translation of this word is a flourishing life. Again, I think there's a lot that you as salespeople and marketing people can take away from this translation of Aristotle's eudaimonic life. What is the flourishing life? Well, what you have to do in order to understand the flourishing life is you have to come to what philosophers call the terminus ad quem. The point at which it no longer makes sense to say, why that? So you question everything until you get to this terminus ad quem. For those of you that are sales students, question your client until you get to the point where this is what we call finding the pain points. The point at which it no longer makes sense to say, and what else? Right? What is it that you can do to satisfy? What is the terminus ad quem for a human being? Well, you see me out on the mall out here walking across to the palace, that would be the administration building, to file some paperwork or do whatever it is. And you say, well, Grant, how are you? By the way, that's what I don't know where some of my colleagues got this doctor BS. They're enamored with that. Marketing is about building relationships. And so, you can call me Grant. My name's Grant. I prefer that you call me Grant. All of my professors in the marketing PhD went by their first names because fundamentally marketing is about making relationships. What's the fastest way to destroy a relationship? Add a title to it, right? Tell someone, I'm Dr. Someone. No, don't do that. Don't do that. The terminus ad quem. So you see me out on what are you doing, Grant? Well, I'm headed to the doctor's office. Well, why are you going to the doctor's office? Well, I need to have a physical. Well, why do you want to have a physical? Well, because I want to make sure that I'm healthy and in good shape. And well, why do you want to do that? Well, because I want to live. That's the terminus ad quem. It no longer makes sense. I was a why child. I asked my mother why all the time. Like when I'd say, can I have this? No. Why not? Because you'll ruin your dinner. Well, why do I need to eat dinner? Well, because you need, nutrition and you need to grow up and be big and strong and healthy. Well, why? Well, so you don't die. And I would say, well, why? Because I was one of these kids. And at that point, my mother would become exasperated and she'd say, Grant, you can't ride a dead horse. That's the terminus ad quem. You can't ride a dead horse. To which I responded, you can sit on it a while. Right? You want to be healthy. You want to make sure that you're going to live a nice long life and that it's going to be a good life. That's the terminus ad quem. So the terminus ad quem for Aristotle is this idea of balance and harmony and flourishing life, this flourishing life. What do we take away from this as marketers and salespeople? One of the things that we talk about a lot in terms of qualities and cultures and corporations that you're going to go to work for is, do they have a good work-life balance? A recognition that, yeah, you got to meet your goals, you got to meet your quotas, but you also have to have that downtime where you are engaging with your family and you're engaging in friends and you're engaging in play. Because if you don't, which is why when you go to Gartner and you go to their campus, they have pool tables and they have gyms and things, because you need that playtime, even as adults, in order to recharge your batteries so that you can do good work. That's the flourishing life. It is this balanced life where you're not obsessed with necessarily one thing. It's about harmony and balance and proportion. And we see that in the government example. We see that in the friendship example. It's this balance. We get two different answers in the Nicaea-Machian ethics and the Eudemian ethics as to what is the good life. And in one, Aristotle says the good life is it's the contemplative life. And in the other, he says the good life is the actively engaged life of the good lawgiver. These are dramatically different versions of the good life. The active life of the good lawgiver is not one that is necessarily contemplative. And the contemplative life is not the one that is engaged in the world. But what you see is you see Aristotle doing this. This is the guy who's advising Alexander the Great. This is the guy who's studying the cuttlefish, who's studying 350 Greek polises. He was engaged in the contemplative life. He was also engaged in the active life. Every discipline on a college campus owes a debt to Aristotle. The way we classify things in the natural world, kingdom, phyla, genus, species, was largely developed by Aristotle. His systems of government are still used. It's this balance and proportionality of life. Now, what are the criticisms of this? So the criticism of Socrates and Plato is that's never going to happen. It's not realistic. Again, their response is, you don't need me to tell you what's realistic. That's the business of the sociologist, the psychologist, the political scientist, the marketer, whatever. I'm going to tell you what the best is. The criticisms of Aristotle, I think, are not all that wonderful. One, and I didn't put it up here, the biggest criticism is, I guess I left it off this one. The biggest criticism is, how do we know that the purpose of a human being is the eudaimonic life? Other people would say something else. If we took a poll, you might find people that would say, well, the purpose of a human life is, and in business, for example, there's a company that was founded in Dallas by a woman who became a billionaire called Mary Kay. We had a whole group that came to my business of Mary Kay. They all had pink Cadillacs. If you are driving a Mary Kay pink Cadillac, you are a multimillionaire selling Mary Kay in what we lovingly refer to as multi-level marketing, right? Some people call that a pyramid scheme. Mary Kay starts out and she says, and one of her things is she wanted to recognize that women had to, oftentimes have familial responsibility. So her motto was something like God first, family second, career third. So a lot of people have adopted this motto, God first. A lot of people say that the end of a human being is to worship the deity. I think Aristotle gives us a really good rationale as to why the flourishing life is the end of a human being. Even if you accepted that you have an obligation to honor a deity, you can't do that if you aren't a balanced person. So I think that's worth it. The second is, even if we determine that we can agree on what is the end of a human being, can we really instill these virtues in people? How do we get these virtues? Well, it's the means between extremes, like utility, pleasure, perfection, right? One, a few, many. A few is the mean between two extremes. Well, we have to look at extreme defects of character and then identify what is the means between the extreme defects of character. So for example, what's an extreme defect of character? Well, an extreme defect that most people use as the example is the coward, right? So cowardice. What's the opposite of cowardness? It's heedlessness. This is the person who charges into any battle. I had a friend like this in high school. He was a lot of fun. He was a little guy. It's always amazing to me how much, it's not the size of the dog in the fight, it's the size of the fight in the dog. He was a little guy, and I watched him take down guys that were much bigger than him because he was fast, and he was strong, and he was fearless. And if he thought that you disrespected him in any way, shape, or form, man, it was on. Lots of fun. Didn't want to be on his bad. I was glad he was my friend. Didn't want to be on his bad side. Not healthy, right? That's heedlessness. The coward is someone who runs away at every provocation. What's the middle ground? Courage. Courage is the middle ground. The courageous person knows when to fight. They know when it's worth it. Not every fight is worth it. You can win the battle and lose the war. You have to know when to fight. Now, the next criticism is, can we instill this? I think we can, and I'm out of time. So we'll talk about 13 virtues next time, and then I will finish with this, and hopefully we'll be on schedule, since we kind of got off because I had one day that I had to miss, and then I had to let people come in. If you got a duck, I think only one person got a duck today, come see me, and I will see the rest of you on Tuesday. Good luck, have fun, enjoy the rest of your week. Try not to get struck by lightning out there, particularly if you're going to the golf course today. There's lots of lightning around.
Thank you.